This is alternative political analysis, and I'm glad to have Jane Lamb on today. And you wanted to discuss a few issues at present, Jane?
Yeah, I actually read your Why There Was No Red Tsunami in America, and I actually concur with pretty much every point there. You're exactly right. If you examine the working class in America or even worldwide, it's not hard to see that the working class is conservative.
I agree wholeheartedly, and the opinion polls on certain social and cultural issues show that the working class is largely socially conservative.
Exactly. Even here in America, as you shown in your Why There Was No Red Tsunami, the biggest portion of the working class, they tend to vote Republican, which there are definitely issues with Republicans. George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Nixon, for example.
I
Uh,
agree.
but the Republican Party started pretty much from the working class, like Roosevelt, Teddy, of course, not Delano, and Lincoln were both very much for labor unions. They were very antitrust. There's actually even a theory out there. One of the theories that they've examined throughout time, that part of the reason Lincoln was assassinated is because he was against the idea of a Federal Reserve, which, despite the name, is privately owned. It's not government owned.
Also, it hasn't maximized employment, and it definitely hasn't controlled prices by keeping inflation down.
Yeah, exactly. As an American myself, I can say there is a big difference since Trump was in office and Biden was in office. Inflation, it was funny actually. I was watching the news the other day. Biden was talking about inflation is at an all time low. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones ticker next to him showed inflation up by 13%.
I remember that. That was quite funny.
It really was. He contradicted. Well, he didn't mean to. It was just the news stock ticker, but the stock ticker literally in live action contradicted him.
And the highest inflation since Reagan speaks volumes as well, as does the fact that since Biden got into office, American workers are over $4,200 worse off than they were at the end of Trump's term.
Oh yeah, exactly. Cause I remember there's a butcher shop here in my town called Country Fresh Meats. They you used to could get what they called the working man special. It was, and you still can, but it's a lot more expensive now because of the inflation and price of meat, etc. Just what they have to pay too. But you could get what they call the working man special for $125. The working man special included like 16 sirloins, 10 pounds of ground beef, like 10 pork chops, like 8 packs of chicken. Like it was enough meat really to get you through the whole month as long as it was just a few people in the household. That same working man special now, due to the inflation of meat prices in general, now it costs you about $300, whereas formerly it was 125.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the escalation against Russia in Ukraine put gas prices up, which is used for transporting the meat and the animals, and the price of feed has went up because the price of grain went up, and
Oh
Ukraine and
yeah,
Russia
I've
are
definitely noticed the
grain
price in
exporters.
the grains increase because we eat a lot of sandwiches around here for lunch, and you can definitely notice the price in grain increase.
Yeah, both Ukraine and Russia are wheat exporters,
Hmm.
and between a third and 100% of wheat imported by certain African countries was cut off because of the escalation against Russia.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at a trade map of the world trade relations in 2000 and compare it to now, America is vastly outnumbered by China in trade partners.
Oh, yeah, they're basically trading more with China than they are the US. And another reason why Ukrainian wheat imports can't get to Africa is because the Banderites mine their own ports in the Black Sea shelf, so they can't get it out of the Black Sea into the Mediterranean.
Right, you're exactly right. And that's another big thing. A lot of these liberals out here, and even some people that could be our would be allies, such as the conservatives, libertarians, etc. They don't really understand that the whole Ukraine situation is a 70-year CIA proxy war anyway. They don't, and it's hidden from us. Like if they would just go back to even before February 2022, even our own Western media was broadcasting and speaking about the Nazi problem in Ukraine. But suddenly it's like all that media suddenly disappeared. You have to dig for it if you're going to find it. Which I've actually used that to actually convince a few of my more conservative friends to come more toward our side because they saw the reality of it and that we pretty much have blinders on about the whole situation. Russia has always been America's boogeyman.
But it makes no sense. How does oil, gas, farmland, and lithium in Ukraine stop America shipping liquefied natural gas to Europe?
Right, and it's not just that. It's like you covered in your article why there was no red tsunami. It's not like we really need to depend on Russia if we just even open friendly trade relations with Canada and Mexico. There's plenty of potash there.
But and not even that. They just want to eat up Russia's portion of Europe's energy market. That's why they blew up Nord Stream 2.
Oh yeah, and Tucker Carlson even has called that out, which surprised me, but not really as much as it would have years ago. Because I mean, he's had Hinkle on, but showed footage from back in November of last year where Biden pretty much threatened, like out of his mouth, to blow Nord Stream 2, and then it's suddenly blown up, but it's Russia's fault. Why would Russia destroy their own infrastructure? First off, that should be people's first clue. And secondly, if they saw this footage that Tucker Carlson actually showed on air, they would kind of maybe start piecing two and two together, especially because the day it happened, one of Biden's aides was talking about this is a major advent for America and the citizens of Ukraine. You know how they try to play it all up.
I do, but what was interesting about that day is that the U.S. Naval Institute published its coordinates at that part of the Baltic Sea at that
Mm-hmm.
time.
You're exactly right. Like
So,
it's
so
so
that's
obvious,
that's giving it away. So it
right?
is.
It's so obvious the U.S. military was behind it, but unfortunately, a lot of Americans are blind to it, and the liberal infestation don't help.
But the gap in Europe's energy market, that's going to be exploited by US or liquefied natural gas exporters. So K Bono, who benefits? The liquefied natural gas exporters in the US, because Europe's going to be banning that instead of the Russian gas through Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2.
Exactly, and that's another thing. U.S. imperialism, once again, is hurt more than just their intended target because there's going to be thousands of Europeans that are suffering this winter because they don't have good enough heat.
While energy providers make record profits.
Right.
Yet,
Uh,
yet the supply can't meet the demand.
right. And it's like in America, which you're already aware of, because you and William sure kicked the hornet's nest there, but I support y'all on that. In America, we do have a very, very bad liberal problem. And then you have the neoconservatives. Like I'm perfectly fine with conservatives, libertarians, etc. It's the neoconservatives because they just go hand in hand with the Democrats.
American exceptionalism and military supremacist interventions for imperial markets.
Right, which is one reason I'll be honest, I voted I voted for the Republican Tim Scott here at the midterms for South Carolina because Tim Scott, even though he's a Republican, within the last few years, because he was running for re-election. Within the last few years, he has put more money into our schools. He has put more money into our agricultural foundations here in South Carolina because South Carolina, we are a really big agricultural state. One of the biggest producers of peaches and milk in America, actually. Uh, he's put more money into infrastructure. Like Lawrence County, you used to couldn't drive more than like a mile before seeing another pothole. Sometimes multiple potholes in 1 mile, and our roads are a lot better now. Like Tim Scott's done amazing things for South Carolina, as well as he's got a bill in office right now because South Carolina is currently a right to work state, which means an employer can fire you for any reason or no reason whatsoever. But
That's a union busting law, isn't it? Right to
yeah,
work.
Tim Scott is pushing a bill to basically give government protections to labor unions. Because currently in South Carolina, if an employer sees you talking to a union rep, they can fire you on the spot simply for that.
So he's legislating to improve labor rights.
Yeah, like my portion of South Carolina, which he's the representative of District 14. We've seen a lot of improvements since Tim Scott took office on the last election, not this midterm. Like that's how I vote. I vote for who I see as helping the working class. And time again, you can observe because I always, before I vote, I look at everybody's policies, what they stand for, etc. And time again, if somebody took the time to study, they would see Democrats are not at all for the working class.
They've seemed particularly weak since Trump ran.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Trump, he isn't. I'm not necessarily going to say he's a good guy or whatever, but Trump actually did a lot for the working class. Like Trump passed the child stimulus, which is where on our tax returns for every child you have, you actually get an extra 2,000 back, regardless per child. He helped build a lot of jobs here in America, which unemployment is at an all-time low. And Trump actually had it at an all-time at an all-time high. I mean, Trump had it at an all-time low though. Trump had it down to 2.2% unemployment rate. Currently, I think the numbers are like 14.6% unemployment rate.
And that's the great economy of the Democrats.
Exactly.
So that means labor participation's down since Trump left office.
Exactly. And a lot of businesses have and factories have been forced to cut their working base. Like I have a friend, he was working at Inman Mills, a textile mill here in South Carolina. He actually got laid off and is currently on unemployment stimulus because the plant laid off over half the workers because they just couldn't afford to pay them anymore.
And that just means more struggling people are going to be on welfare instead of like there's what 6 or 7 trillion in any given year of a US budget. Like, could none of that be reallocated to jobs programs to get the 14% down?
Right. Like, look at all the money Biden sent to Ukraine to help the vendor rights when we had a baby formula shortage right here in America, a baby formula shortage, which was directly caused by capitalist practices. Basically, what
It
happened
was a
there?
monopoly.
Yeah, there's a monopoly on baby formula. There's three major companies, and out of those three major companies, they all get their formula from one producer. That producer wasn't properly cleaning their machines, and it's like you covered in why there was no red tsunami. It caused the bacterial setup, so all that baby formula had to be recalled.
Is is that not um, starving American children in the same way the kulaks starved Ukrainians um, in the 30s?
You mean what they blame on communism, even though it was a result of
It,
kulaks?
well, it wasn't Stalin hoarding the grain.
The kulaks worst. Stalin had nothing to do with that. Stalin, basically, from my understanding, from where I read about it a little bit in my philosophy classes, my understanding of it is basically what happened is USSR was pushing for a system of collectivization in Ukraine. The kulaks, the wealthy landowners who had previously used serf labor being really no different than the slave labor
Slaves.
here in America, they weren't too happy about that. And so they hoarded, burned, and deliberately sabotaged millions of pounds of grain. And anybody who's ever been in Eastern Europe knows that grains are one of the biggest staples of their diet.
But it was basically hoarding the people's food from them. And I see a parallel between what the kulaks did and what the Democrats did.
Exactly, and you're not wrong because I've actually noticed that resemblance myself, and it's just like to me, we're witnessing basically 100 years ago all over again.
But America's a net, like, it's a net producer of food. Um, America produces more food than it consumes, and I think the energy costs and the fertilizer costs, because of the escalation against Russia, will hit small American farmers hard. And as I said in the article, 85% of US food production is by small family farms and small family ranches.
But then you got people like Bill Gates hoarding up the rest of it.
Like, I'm not against the idea of acre caps, but if nationalization's not possible, I don't see why acre caps shouldn't be brought in, because food is an essential.
Exactly. Food. The World Economic Forum. They're pushing this whole "you will have nothing and you will be happy." And if you really get to the root of it, that shit is evil as fuck, anti-human, and the more religious elements of our movement could even say anti-Christ.
It is. It is anti-Christian. Um, I was hungry and you fed me.
Exactly, or like when in the Bible, Jesus was preaching to his disciples and his followers, and that wealthy man approached them. he asked Jesus. He said, "What is the key to get into heaven?" Jesus
Hmm.
looked at him and he told
Hmm.
him, "Go and sell all your belongings, give it to the poor, come and follow me." And the wealthy man said he couldn't do that and walked away. At that point, Jesus turned to his followers and his disciples and he straight up said, "It is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of the needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God."
I like that passage so I do. And it also another thing on food security: land, peace, and bread. Or yeah, land, peace, and bread.
Yeah,
Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution of October.
yeah. Which the anniversary of that actually wasn't that long ago because a lot of people think it literally
105.
happened. Yeah, a lot of people think it literally happened in October, but like I've pointed out to some friends before, it's just because they used a different calendar at
The
that time than
Julian
they do now.
calendar,
Yeah,
which is November on the Gregorian calendar, of course.
yeah,
But yeah, millions were starving under the Tsar, and that continued under Kerensky.
yeah. And for a while after the Tsar, it was good. The Bolsheviks restored a lot of hope for the Soviet citizens until they were pretty much sold out by the likes of Gorbachev and Khrushchev and Yeltsin.
That was a tragedy. Like
Uh,
Ukraine went from being the second biggest or second most powerful Soviet nation and on an economic equal with France to being the poorest country in Europe and on on a par level with Puerto Rico.
yeah, and another thing with the whole Ukrainian situation and NATO and the NAFO, the North Atlantic Fellows Organization, them fucking idiots, is they really don't realize some of the earliest commanders of NATO were former SS officers them
Mhm.
damn selves.
Also, on this liberal and fascism thing, um, the liberal democracy that was Weimar became the Third Reich, and everything the German Workers' Party did was legal and constitutional under the Weimar Constitution.
Yep.
So that shows how liberals enable fascists.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure you read my article on the pretty much how they go hand in hand. Because you list the trait of fascism, you'll also find that same trait in liberalism. I've always lived by the motto: you cut a liberal deep enough, the fascist bleeds. Because what else is a liberal except the fascist with better PR?
I think Tucker Carlson used that Black Panther quote: "Scratch a liberal and a fascist blades."
Yeah, because like I said, when it comes down to it, what is a liberal but a fascist with better PR?
And as I responded to that, since the 24th of February this year, the fascists seem to have good public relations.
Yeah, exactly. And that's truly terrifying because if you observe the rise of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, you'll see a lot of these same patterns we're seeing here in America.
And as was said before, that 80 billion could have been used in America to deal with crises. And it's the liberals of the Democratic Party who are supporting the neocons the most.
Yep. It's like if people would take the time to dig to the root of the matter, they would see time and time again. It's the Democrats.
And it was only a few years ago, Ro Khanna was saying that Congress shouldn't be funding the Banderites. And he just did a complete 180 in February.
Exactly. I remember that actually.
So it shows that they know, they simply don't care if they are enabling Nazis. And it's like that C-14 guy, Yevhen Karas, said, after Britain, Ukraine has the most Javelin missiles on the European continent. And that is terrifying. Do you really want Nazis with long-range ballistic missiles?
No, no sane person would.
And as that Nazi said, it will be problems for the whole world.
Well, it's also like another thing our media ain't showing about these Nazis we're talking about is I know you saw the video. I had sent it from my old profile to the Thomas Paine Institute. There was literally a video that was going around on Telegram of one of the Ukrainian generals just kicking dead bodies over into a mass grave at the bottom of a hill.
That's right.
Like if our media showed this, people would start waking up. But that's why they don't show people these images coming out of Ukraine.
Also, New York is a liberal bastion, yet Azov held a public rally there.
Oh, I remember.
And on American liberals enabling Nazism, the ACLU defended the right of the United States National Socialist Party to march through Skokie, but the same ACLU never defended communists during the Red Scare.
Oh, I didn't know that about the ACLU. But yeah, some of those points I covered are like we was just talking about, invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy. Liberals want to demonize anybody with even slightly conservative values. You've seen that.
Yeah.
Hell, Neil's one of our slightly more progressive, though not liberal comrades. Just for supporting you and William, he's been getting people like telling them they hope his cancer wins. It's like it's disgusting how low they'll stoop.
That is deplorable. That's disgusting, and I don't even. Okay, if people want to have a problem with what I say, fine. But why did they need to go after William? I thought he was quite mild mannered during our second discussion, and I didn't think the Socialist Society of the University of Dundee had any business forcing him to resign.
No, they didn't. It's like they just don't want anybody to have any words if they disagree with them. That's another component I covered in my article is they have like groupthink. They want everybody to think the same. They want everybody to follow their ideals. Anybody outside of that is to be persecuted and basically put aside.
And how is that going to look to the average working class person in Dundee?
Oh, it's not gonna look that good. Like we saw, even though there was a bunch of liberals trying to smear William in the comments of that one particular thread, there were also people backing them right there from Scotland and England and Ireland. I saw in the comments.
And
Like liberals, they don't realize their actions is ultimately what's going to be their downfall.
but there are a lot of social problems in Dundee itself, unemployment and heroin overdoses. But a student said something in a YouTube discussion that within like that's the priority for them. How does that materially improve the lives of people in Dundee?
It doesn't. It's actually I don't know the word I'm looking for here. I lost my train of thought, but it's basically does the opposite of that.
And it gets me when liberals say to a socially conservative comrade, stop fighting the culture war. It's not socially conservative comrades who are fighting the culture war.
Exactly, it's the liberals.
If you're prioritizing Councilman William over addressing living costs, employment, or overdoses, it's you who is prioritizing the culture war, not the socially conservative comrades, but it just goes over their head.
Exactly, and that kind of falls into another point I had covered. Liberal fascists have to develop to rise to their power. They have to develop a thug caste or underclass, essentially. We saw it with the black shirts and the black shirts of Italy, Hitler's own SA, and then later SS. Pinochet had them. Francisco Franco had them. And then we look at the liberals here in America and we see things like Antifa. Antifa, while it did have noble roots out of the Communist Party of Germany, as a direct counter agent to Nazism, it got infiltrated like a lot of movements do, and is now a liberal cesspit where they put the working class in danger. Same thing with Black Lives Matter. Now, I have nothing against Black liberation. Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party is one of my inspirations. That led me to be a revolutionary. My problem is when it becomes against what it's truly going for. Because how does it look to the working class when you have a movement directly funded by George Soros, by the way? Which that's another topic. George Soros actually helped the Nazis and attributes that to his early wealth. But they bring out these African Americans. They incite them, and then when these African Americans from Black Lives Matter destroy these businesses and all, it's psychological warfare to incite hatred rather than go against it, which is what they preach on the surface.
A couple of points on that. On the Open Society and the Ford Foundation's thugs, if they were anti-fascist action, they would have been on a plane to Ukraine after the Maidan, and 121 people died in Maidan, and that kind of street violence has a parallel, I think, to the George Floyd protests, in which 25 people died. And when you think of January 6th being used to crush dissent, one person died and it was a protester, whereas in the other events which liberals supported, innocent people died, and it wasn't protesters who were suffering the most of the violence.
You're right, and I mean, that's exactly what it boils down to. They want to do everything they can to keep us divided along whatever line it is, whether it be political, racial, religious, etc. So they can keep us divided, because the one thing the globalists fear is a united working class.
I couldn't agree more, and that is why identity politics, be it race, religion, sex, orientation, and even ideological divisions are used so that people do not come together and protest. And I think cancellation has a lot to do with that. If you cancel somebody, it means people will be afraid to push issues or protest alongside them. And another thing cancellation does is it's a get out of jail free card for liberals who do not want to or cannot engage the argument being made.
Exactly. And that actually, I know I'm going to have a lot of liberals come at my throat for this because, like I said, I agree with y'all. But that brings me to another point. Fascists, they have to promote the great myth, they have to promote pseudoscience over actual deemed science, and they persecute and silence the true intelligentsia any way they can. Science shows us that by its very definition, a man is an adult male human being. A male is a being that can produce a gamete called spermatozoa to impregnate a female. Females produce the gamete ova to give birth. And the definition of a woman is an adult human female. And like the DSM-5, the National Institute of Mental Health, and the majority of the medical professionals and journals that are released do consider it a mental illness. And my personal opinion is just like any other mental illness, we shouldn't just treat it as normal and condone it. It should be treated with therapy, medication, and if necessary, because the person becomes a danger to themselves or others, involuntary inpatient psychiatric treatment.
A good analogy is, would you reinforce the lie that an anorexic tells themselves that they're too fat? Would you say, yeah, fatty, stop eating, you'll be fine?
Right. I mean,
Or do you seek treatment for it?
the people that actually want to get help, they seek treatment for it. If, like, for example, the example just now was obesity. If they truly want to shed that weight, they'll start eating healthier, they'll start exercising, they'll do everything they can to correct that.
And like that case, you don't tell the morbidly obese you're anorexic, and you don't tell the anorexic you're morbidly obese, because that's going to exacerbate the condition and make it worse.
Right. And Marxism itself is scientific, and the science is on our side. Sorry, libs.
And I'll love that people who say I believe the science, and then they tell you that a zygote isn't a human life and that men can get pregnant. And also, I said this in my second discussion with William, but I think it needs to be said again. Marx in the German ideology, we should see people as they are, not as they or others perceive them. So
Right.
we have to acknowledge reality, regardless if it fits into our desired outcome or not.
Right. We have to look at, as Marxists, we have to look at everything through a dialectical worldview.
And we have to accept biological realities with that.
Exactly. And I mean, I do have some really good close comrades who are trans, but these are comrades you would never know they were trans. Like, I'm not obviously not going to out them. You would never know they were trans because they aren't obnoxious about it.
And they're not shouting it into a bullhorn every 5 seconds.
Right.
But then again, most working class people want to get on with their lives. But radical liberals cannot have that, as they don't see it as advantageous to their agenda.
Right, and like with the comrades, at least that I know that are trans, but they aren't obnoxious about it. These are comrades who they'll tell you they ain't worried about a fucking bathroom issue because they understand the safety risk present there. They say if they have to use any bathroom and they don't feel safe in the bathroom of their gender assigned at birth, they'll just use the family restroom. It's a one toilet restroom, it can be locked.
I thought you were going to say if the disabled toilet's empty, they'll go in there.
Oh, no. Here in America, in a lot of places, they have the male and female bathroom, but then they also have the family bathroom, which typically has a changing table, but it's a
Oh, the
one toilet
diaper
bathroom and
table one.
locked from the inside. Yeah.
There's usually 4 over here. There's those 3, and there's a disabled toilet.
Yeah, usually our main bathrooms, though, do have a stall for disabled people. It's a lot wider, a lot longer, but it is in the main bathroom. And obviously, because for disabled, it's closer to the bathroom door.
Yeah. But are there many trans-specific bathrooms in America?
None that I know of, but I do live in a more conservative area. Like the only bathroom, like here in South Carolina, we do not have anything like that bathroom bill. We think that's ridiculous. That was actually voted on a couple of years ago, and like 73% of South Carolinians said hell no.
Was that a
But
ballot initiative?
yeah, it was during Obama. Now Target, however, the chain, it don't matter where they're at. Trans people can use the bathroom of their preferred gender. But that's a corporate thing. Like an employee is not, by corporate policy, is not allowed to tell somebody that's a biological male they can't use the female restroom because they can lose their job if they do.
That's ridiculous. I think that's... So what happens if a sex crime occurs?
I don't know how they would handle that. Thankfully, nothing like that has actually been happened yet. At least not been covered. Which I'm sure even if it did happen, the liberal media wouldn't cover it. They would try to cover it up. But as far as I know, nothing like that's happened yet. So I really couldn't say how they would deal with that if it does happen.
And you've just brought up an interesting point. 90% of the US media is controlled by the 6 big corporations: AT&T, CBS, Comcast, Disney, News Corp, and Viacom.
Right.
So that's not imperialist. It's not fascistic at all. It's not like they're merging state and corporate power to judicially punish the people.
Right. And it's interesting you brought that up because I also covered that in my article. One of the key tenets of fascism is control the media, you control the people.
Basically, mass scale indoctrination.
Right. It's basically, like you said, mass indoctrination. It's like this one. He was kind of the Alex Jones of his day. He was kind of loony for the most part, but he did make some valid points. David Icke. He said one time, the greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is an oblong box in the corner of your room. We are constantly being told what to do, what to say, what to think by people like this: newscasters, politicians, teachers. We are in a world and in a country where we are being fundamentally deceived and lied to.
And I believe he said that on all places on BBC.
It was BBC. Ironically enough, you are absolutely right because I had found it on the internet and I
The
saved it.
master hypnotists.
Yeah.
Like, I've literally came home from a peaceful protest in our town only for the BBC to tell me it was something else entirely.
I saw you and Lazarus talking about that the other day. Like they made you out to be like some domestic homebrew terrorist or some shit.
Oh, that was the Independent.
Oh, that was the Independent. Okay, so that's not the first time that's happened.
No, all Republicans are evil, according to the British media.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Like I said, my grandpa, before he immigrated to America, he was PIRA. I grew up around a grandpa that was up the raw.
But it's got the British bias in media has got a lot worse since the Good Friday Agreement. A lot worse.
I've heard because I reconnected with some Irish family about a year and a half ago, and I've heard tensions are getting kind of high. And honestly, I don't wish it to come to that. I just want to see a united Ireland. 26 plus 6 equals 1. But I have a feeling where y'all maybe just from what I've studied on the coverage and all y'all and what my own family have said, y'all might be on the verge of another Irish Civil War
or another Troubles.
Yep.
Because the loyalists are not too happy about the protocol because it's affecting trade with Britain, so it is. And basically, East-West trade benefits both the Irish economy and the British economy. And
right.
basically, the 6 occupied counties are going to feel it because it's going to make the Free State worse off. So that's going to affect North-South trade. And it's going to make the British worse off if they persevere with the protocol. And that's going to affect the East-West trade. And people in this part of Ulster are going to pay the price. But as long as Brussels gets to punish the Brits for voting for Brexit, then they won't care. But this, with the energy crisis and the hate or eat ultimatums, that they ought to be careful what they wish for because people will get restless.
Yeah, and I actually wasn't aware of that with the whole trade issue being a big reason behind the tensions.
Well, it weakens what they call the United Kingdom because it divides the customs union and internal market, as they'd call it, and basically anything that separates the unionists from Britain, they see it as a cultural, economic, and political threat to the union with Britain. So that will make the ethnic tensions increase. And things are bad enough in this apartheid state without that, as there are literally physical barriers of segregation called peace lines.
Right.
So basically, on one side of the wall, it's going to be mostly British people. On the other side of the wall, mostly Irish people. And I should send you the ethnic map of Belfast at some point, and it's like a checkerboard of orange and green.
Yeah, do that because I'm actually interested in that.
And on imperialism, yeah, it's this Britain basically backs US on everything, so they do.
Oh, I know. That's a long lasting trend, unfortunately.
And basically, the US has 700 to 800 military bases in 80 countries, and the US spends 780 billion on its military. The next nine biggest combined is $653.2 billion. So 780 is far outstrips 653, which is the next nine biggest militaries. So
Yeah.
why is the excessive military spending needed unless they're planning to not only um, go and support Ukraine in a land war with Russia, but they also want to go to war with China over semiconductors in Taiwan.
Yeah, I heard about the Taiwanese situation, and I actually read about it a little bit in your Red Tsunami. You covered that a little bit. Uh, that's the thing. The whole Taiwan China situation. The U.S. is trying to accelerate there. It's really no different than the Ukraine Russia situation. They accelerated. It all boils down to what they get out of it. It don't matter who's hurt in the process, what's destroyed.
And also, that would be the same military mistake in terms of strategy that Hitler and the Nazis made. They were fighting on the Western Front with Britain and then opened up another front in the East. Whereas US is fighting to the east with Russia and Ukraine. But if they open up a front with China and Taiwan, that's war on two fronts, and it would be the same blunder, I think. And also
And
on
regardless, if Biden is stupid enough to do that, China and Russia are the two biggest military superpowers in the world, along with the U.S. That's two military superpowers coming at one.
also the other two have considerable nuclear deterrence. So that's the possibility for World War III.
Oh yeah, Russia. It's no secret. Russia has more nukes than we do, stocked from the USSR period.
And also, it isn't an efficient use of funds. Like $35 trillion went missing from the Pentagon. The US national debt is $31.282 trillion. So if that missing money had been allocated towards paying down the debt, there would be a surplus.
And with that, with the Pentagon thing, if you remember, a lot of money went missing from the Pentagon once before, about 21 years ago. And the paper trail was mysteriously burned when the Pentagon got hit by a plane.
Hmm. Oh, that
All those
indeed.
records were stored in the West Wing, the only wing that got struck.
And no scorch marks either.
Right, like and it's like they think we're stupid. Plane debris was found at the Twin Towers. Plane debris was found at the field in Pennsylvania. So why do they really expect us to believe a plane burned to nothing after hitting the Pentagon?
In Langley, where there's a population around.
Right, like
Somebody would have seen something.
right. It's so obvious that that was basically a cruise missile that struck the Pentagon.
Well, it could have been a bomb in the West.
Yeah. I saw I had seen a video, which I think I had shared in TPI at one point. Caden actually still has a copy of it, though. It shows a fast flying object coming in low and at basically terminal velocity. Physics ain't going to allow a plane to be that low and still be coming in that fast without pretty much shattering all the hail from the velocity against it.
And 9/11, that basically expanded the security state. And do you know that the NSA monitors all computers, wireless networks, and international cables?
Oh, I know. It's like if
So
it's like what we was discussing earlier on another topic. All people really have to do is they have to be willing to search for this information, or even allow us to point it to them in good faith, and they'll see they've been being led along like sheep or cogs in a machine the whole time.
basically, if you want to evade NSA surveillance, a pen and paper would be a better option. And also, the post 9/11 United States became a lot more overtly authoritarian.
Patriot Act.
And there are 2 million prisoners in the United States. That's a 500% increase in 40 years. And the highest incarceration rate in the world, 639 prisoners per 100,000 people. And when you compare this with China, a much bigger population, China has 1.7 million prisoners, and their incarceration rate is 121 prisoners per 100,000. That means the United States has an incarceration rate 5 times higher than the People's Republic of China, yet there are still those who allege that the People's Republic is authoritarian in comparison to the United States.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, I was actually going to get to that eventually, but I'm glad you covered it about the incarceration rate. I've been incarcerated before. Now, let me tell you what incarceration is like here in America. Uh, you wake up every morning at 4 a.m. You have to make your bed. You cannot go back to sleep until 10 p.m. Usually, during that time, during the first 3 to 4 hours, they're coming around and beating on the doors, making sure you ain't doing anything you're supposed to. So you might be lucky to get 2 to 3 hours total of sleep in the night. If one person does something they're not supposed to, they'll put the whole unit on complete lockdown for a week. Lockdown means you aren't allowed to use access the canteen. You aren't allowed to access the phones. You aren't allowed to do anything except stay in your cell, because during lockdown they won't even let you out of the cell to take a shower. Food is typically less than the recommended nutritional guide. Like, for example, a common meal in prisons here in America might consist of a piece of meat about that big, a piece of cornbread also about that big, one scoop of beans, and maybe, if you're lucky, a scoop of potatoes or something else. So they underfeed you because they want to keep you compliant. If they catch you really doing any exercise on your own outside of rec, you can get a write up for it. Maximum security for where they put you for disciplinary action, like if you get in a fight or whatever, you're in a cell. While in this cell, you can't do anything for several days. Like, there is no canteen, phone, anything down there, because it's disciplinary. It's underground. typically, so there is no sunlight even coming through your windows. When you take a shower, you have to do so. You're led into the shower. You undress while handcuffed and shackled. You hand your clothes through the bars of the shower while handcuffed and shackled. And then you have to proceed to wash yourself while handcuffed and shackled. That's not an easy feat to pull off. Uh, like it's basically they treat you like animals in a zoo more than humans.
And yet, people who defend such a system have the neck to criticize labor camps in the Gulag archipelago.
Exactly, like it's hypocritical.
And I think under both Bush and Obama, there were more prisoners incarcerated in the United States than at any time in under Stalin in the Gulag.
Oh, I know. I'm glad you brought it up, though, to enlighten the people who otherwise would keep the blinders on.
Also, you reminded me as you were describing the conditions in solitary confinement there that the United Nations lists solitary confinement as a method of torture.
The Geneva, in addition to that, Geneva and Hague conventions ban mustard gas and pepper spray. It's considered chemical warfare, but yet our
Yeah.
police use it every day on our citizens.
Also, do they not use CS gas and other chemical weapons in prison rats?
Oh, they do. I've been hit by it. It's not a pleasant experience. I wouldn't one of the people riding, but but obviously it spreads quick and it spreads very wide. So there I was coughing and choking and gagging, and I have scarring on my lungs from a very bad bout of asthma when I was 9. So I was pretty much in medical. I was pretty much in the medical unit for about 2 or 3 days afterwards.
Did that not exacerbate conditions which I'm assuming weren't conducive to healthy recoveries prior to such an occurrence? That would have only exacerbated it with more bodies and more ailments.
Oh, and not only that, but I can tell you of a few instances where there was one time when I was incarcerated, my cellmate, he came down with a very, very bad case of the flu. And he was an older man anyway. He was like 63, 64. But he came down with a very bad case of the flu. He kept asking for a nurse. They was like, you got to put it in on the kiosk. He kept telling them there is no kiosk because we were in classification at that time, which is where they hold you until they decide which unit you're going to be on. He's like, there is no kiosk, so how am I supposed to put in a request? It was like, wait till you get to a unit. Well, usually when you're in classification, it takes you between 7 to 14 days to be assigned an actual unit in general population. This man the whole time kept begging him. He's like, please, I'm dying. I know something's wrong. And I was like, you just got to wait till you can put it in on the kiosk. My cellmate ended up dying of the flu in the middle of the night in the bunk right next to me because they didn't want to give him medical care.
So, what are those budgets spent on then? Just governor's wages?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it's going more to the COs, the government, or whatever, but they really do not take care of their prisoners, especially here in South Carolina. And I'm sure you've heard of the outdoor prison camp in Arkansas, which is even worse than my county detention center ever thought to be. And mine's pretty bad.
That sounds like a good, well, not a good note, but a concise note to end on, unless you want to add anything further, Gene.
That's fine. We can wrap up, but yeah, I appreciate you bringing me on, and I hope to be back on in the future.
Hopefully that will be sooner rather than later, comrade.
All right, I'll see you later then, comrade.
Thank you.
Bye bye.